Hi. So I thought I would do this when I was fully healed, and I thought I would do this uh, in a different way. Fully, I'd have an awesome clothes on, and my hair would be done, and I'd be vibrant and healthy, and I would share my story um, of recovery and triumph, and maybe I still will. But I do feel at this point that I'm ready and I want to tell my story. So it's going to be in parts because it's a long, as many of you who have suffered with chronic illness, severe illness, acute illness, all kinds of illness that has lingered. It's long and it's convoluted. And there was definitely not a lead up to illness for me. There was an event, there was a tipping point, and there was an illness. So that's not what I'm going to share with you today. I'm going to share with you the lead up to that event, tipping point, and the beginning of basically the no return into 100% illness. And I always thought, and I always think looking back, that was the day. That was the day it all began. If only I could go back and change that one event, everything would be different. If only, you know, um, I didn't get ill, if only I'd made different decisions, everything could be different. And maybe it could be. I do still believe that. But I've always sort of poo pooed the idea that it could have been other factors. It could have been stress and other factors that had a hand in creating this at all. And I rejected that simply because I knew what had happened. It was 100% what had happened. I saw it, I felt it, I believed it, I knew exactly what happened. It was a loaded gun and a trigger and pull, and boom, I was into complete and utter illness. But I've done a lot of investigating. I've done a lot of thinking back. I've done a lot of work, as you do when you have a lingering illness that you can't get over. And I've charted everything from 5 years prior, 5 years before this tipping point, I will call it. And, it is true. I bet you if you go back and do a 5 year prior, before you got ill, you will see that there was a perfect storm brewing. There was many factors at play that were physical, that had to do with your physical body and wearing it out, mentally, spiritually. So there'd be psychological stress, tons of psychological stress, tons of physical problems and stress on your body, relationships, emotional, diet, just everything. If you go back and chart this out, I bet you will find what I found, which is that all of this mental, physical, emotional, dietary, lifestyle, exercise, everything that is, I consider to be stress on your nervous system, on your autonomic nervous system, is what caused your perfect storm to brew. So I'm going to go back and I'm going to tell you my perfect storm. So I have always been, and I will start with this, a healthy, happy, vibrant, positive person. And my life was amazing beyond words, okay? I had an amazing childhood. I know therapists have always wanted to say, what happened in the past? And that wasn't me. That wasn't me. I had an amazing mom and an amazing dad, a close relationship with them. I wasn't abused as a child. There was no neglect or abuse, or I had wonderful role models to look up to for marriage. I had lots of great friends, cousins, relatives, family events. We were middle class, upper middle class. We had a great home, lots of vacations. I mean, I had it all. So I grew up amazing. I fell in love with an amazing man. We were married. Life was amazing. Um, and, in my 20s, I suffered with some anxiety, some generalized anxiety, and things like that from leaving home and being out into a new place and into the world. And I guess these were all signs that my body wasn't functioning to the highest level. And when I think back, that could have been lifestyle, environmental, and also my diet. I left home, I had a terrible diet. So, all of these things, the stress of it all, and the diet, and everything, started to sort of get bad after I left home. But I felt, I had wonderful jobs. I fell in love with my husband. We were married. We had a wonderful marriage, great careers, starting out, buying our homes, doing all these exciting things, traveling. So life was wonderful. And we weren't even considering having a baby because we wanted to enjoy each other. So, about 5 years after we were married, we went on a cruise. We went on a wonderful trip to Europe and to Tuscany and Greece and all these places. And after that, we decided, well, let's give it a try. It was my 30th birthday. We had been married for 5 years, and we decided we were going to try for a baby. So we began to try, and things weren't going as planned, but we weren't worried about it. And we were trying and for a couple of years, and now we enter 5 years before my tipping point. Okay, so 5 years before my tipping point, we had been trying for a couple of years, 2 years, and we had just started to go on fertility medication, monthly fertility medication, and we were charting and we were trying to figure out how I could best get pregnant, and it wasn't working, and stress was, it was becoming an issue, a real issue in our lives that we were focused on every month. And 5 years before, we decided to go ahead and do IVF for the first time after all those things didn't work. So this is the start of the brewing of the perfect storm. I had always had a phobia of needles growing up. I couldn't be in hospitals. These types of things started to rear their head because I needed to get over this in order to have IVF and have all the needles and do everything that I was going to do. So it was a very stressful time, overcoming that challenge and doing my first couple of rounds of IVF, which were failures, very physically demanding on my body, mentally, emotionally. There was a lot of stress involved in this. So 2007 and then 2008, we had already done 3 rounds of IVF. Our clinic was going to give up on us. They said, "You will never get pregnant." I was emotionally distraught. I was watching all my friends already have babies, all my cousins, everybody in my life have babies. And I was emotionally, physically, and mentally drained at this point. And we were told that we would never have kids, even with IVF, and that we should probably give up. So, of course, not wanting to ever be the type of person who gave up and always believing in happy endings, I researched the top clinic in all of North America, and we decided to fly there and do an IVF round, and it was a lot of flying back and forth, and we decided that this was our last hope and that we would go to the best place that we could find. So we went to the best clinic that was possible for us. We spent a lot of money. So we had already spent a lot of money. So this round and everything that we were doing was an additional $50,000 for all the travel and everything that we had to do, and the IVF itself. So we were in the hole at this point, almost $100,000. But we got our miracle and we were so ecstatic. We finally, after all this stress, got pregnant on our first try with this clinic, and life was wonderful for a matter of a couple of weeks, a month. It was fantastic. And then I got morning sickness, and it was terrible. It wasn't just morning sickness, it was around the clock morning sickness. So I threw up for about 7 months straight, morning, noon, night. I couldn't hold anything down. It was a terrible, taxing pregnancy. I was so sick. I lost so much weight. We started with twins. We lost one. Um, just the whole pregnancy was so draining on me. And also giving birth with my phobia of hospitals, I had to kind of get over that. I had an enormous, taxing birth that was 61 hours with midwives and doulas, and a planned home birth that ended up in the hospital. And I did go through and give natural labor, but it was a 61-hour labor. It was an incredible marathon, and at the end of it, I was just on the verge of collapse. So it was a very, very trying. Thankfully, my body did recover. I was breastfeeding, so I was giving away more nutrients. I was already depleted. My iron stores were very low. And I was giving all my milk to my new baby. I was staying up. I was a new mom. I had never been a mom before, so I was sleep deprived. So these were all things that were setting the perfect storm brewing, and I didn't even realize it. I just thought this was normal life. Everyone goes through these stressors. Okay, but now that I'm looking back, I can see these things were definitely already mentally, physically taxing my body. Okay, so then after the birth of my son, a couple of months after, my husband went back to work. All the visitors stopped coming, and I started to get this dizzy feeling like I was on a cruise ship. I was swaying back and forth, and it was really bothering me. And I started to go to a doctor and go to an inner ear specialist, and they couldn't figure out why I had this constant swaying. Well, looking back now, I know exactly what it was. I had taken a course of antibiotics. I was breastfeeding. I was low in iron. There were many reasons. I wasn't eating a great diet. So there were many reasons that could have brought upon this. Um, and I sort of lived with it for a few months. And then I started doing eating better and going to physical therapy for it. Um, Started to exercise again, and it went away. So it lasted about 3 or 4 months, and it went away. It was gone for about a month before I got a call that my mom had stage 4 cancer. Now, my mom was my best friend. I loved her very much, and I lived at this point 3,000 miles away from her. So we decided that I was going to fly home to be with her, and I was going to fight this with her. And you can see the stress starting to set in now, right? So I move across the country from Seattle to Canada with my baby, and my husband has to stay back and he's working, and I'm home, and I'm, now away from him. And it's very stressful trying to get the tests done with her and figure out what is going on. And how can we best fight this, and what chemo and radiation and treatments can we do? And I didn't know anything about health back then. If I had known what I know now, I would have done things completely different with my mother. But I didn't know at the time. And so I just relied on this experts, and we had doctors in our family, and they were sending her to experts and different people, promising different miracle protocol cures, and we were just going for the traditional way of healing my mom. My husband moved home a few months later, and then we had bought a new house. We moved in, we did a complete house remodel because we couldn't find the kind of house that we wanted. We had to settle for something less than what we wanted, so we decided to buy it and remodel the whole thing. So all this is going on, a big remodel, a big house purchase, move. My mom's cancer and chemotherapy treatments are going on. I'm the caretaker to my mom and helping my dad and my new baby, right? So this is all going on. So now this is all about a year. Our baby turns a year. And within 9 months of diagnosis from my mom, she died. And it was a long, taxing, grueling treatment, and very, very difficult to watch her health deteriorate. I now know it was from the chemo and the radiation and all the medications she was given. But anyways, that's a whole nother story. So, my mom died. We just had moved into our house. We had gone through, I was the caretaker. I was there for 4 days straight without even eating and sleeping, holding her hand until she died at the very end. I was completely emotionally, physically drained by the time all this happened. So there was a grieving period there. Afterwards, obviously, she was my best friend. She was my world. She was my rock. I depended on her. I talked to her every day. I thought she was going to be there for me and my new baby. And life was not working out as I had planned. So now I was in a new city. I needed to make new friends. I needed to integrate into the city. But all this had happened, so I decided I wasn't going to work. I was just going to stay home with my new baby and recover a little bit. So I did, and we had my mom's life celebration about 6 months later, and so there was a lot of planning for that, and, carrying out those wishes and things that she had wanted, and recovering and grieving, and all of these things. And so that was, a big significant thing about 3 years now prior to my perfect storm brewing and my tipping point. So next, I had, a hard first 6 months with all of the legal stuff that we needed to do and my grieving. And then I had a really nice summer, sort of a summer of recuperation where I was out at the beach with my son and I was coming to terms with things and I was sort of getting my health back and my feelings back. And then I decided, all this had happened. I'd lost my mom. I wanted to try for another baby. So we went back to the same clinic that got us pregnant with my son, and we had to do more rounds of IVF, another round of IVF, which was very costly. So now we're in debt, another 50 or 60 grand. It was a lot of stress to go through this. My body wasn't as strong or resilient as it was taking all the IVF medications and daily injections. And the stress of not being able to transfer the embryo when we were supposed to, and we had to freeze her and then go back 5 months later and do another preparation and more medication in my body. So you can see how I'm just getting depleted, right? Physically, emotionally, spiritually. And I just thought this was normal life. Like, yeah, I wasn't sick yet. I wasn't ill yet. But you can see how things were really brewing here. And then I had my baby. And unfortunately, when I did have my baby, it was another terrible pregnancy of throwing up all the way through it to the point where I was completely depleted of all my vitamins, minerals, iron. I didn't even think I was going to live through the pregnancy. It was that bad. And I had her, and my body sort of bounced back. I started to feed her, and then I got the same dizziness again, that swaying. And I had it because at this point I had gone through all this IVF. My mother had died. We had moved. I was ready to put all this behind me and just enjoy my wonderful family, my husband, my two gorgeous now children that I had. And I was frustrated. Like, how can this be? This dizziness is back a few months after. But again, I got mastitis with this child, which is an infection in your breast from breastfeeding. I had taken another antibiotic. My body was already depleted from throwing up all through the pregnancy. I was breastfeeding her, so I was losing more. And it's no wonder I got that dizziness back. My body was already susceptible to whatever that was. So you can see my autonomic nervous system and my nervous system was already taxed and starting to malfunction. And I was sick of this. I went to the doctor. My anxiety started to kick in about not being able to get rid of this dizziness and what if it doesn't go away. And it was dragging on a little bit longer than my son's, and I was just getting impatient. So this is where the story ends. And this is where we enter a big event and the tipping point for me. But up until this point, you can see that the perfect storm was brewing.